Welcome back, everybody. Today is Tuesday, right? Yeah, Tuesday, October 27th. This is our 1 week presidential election prediction video. We're just 1 week away now. Really hard to believe. Even when we were only 50 days away, it honestly felt like, uh, you know, had made it so far through the campaign season, and here we are with 7 days remaining. We are in the 11th hour. All the final ad buys are being purchased and whatnot. This is it. Okay, this is the last 7 days. I want to say something really quick before we get into the prediction. We've seen a lot of people mention, have asked like, okay, do my donations matter this late? How late can I keep donating? What can I do? To which I would say, uh, your donations absolutely do matter. We have seen examples of candidates who go up on the air. They can go up on air very, very, very fast. These a lot of times campaigns even have a bunch of ads that they never end up using because they just don't have the money. Most campaigns will make extra ads just in the event that they get a big surge of donations. So maybe not right on election night, but if you make a donation even now or in the next couple of days, I think um, it actually could still matter a little bit. They could that campaign, whether it's the Senate campaign, the Biden campaign, the Trump campaign, those campaigns can use that money to add one more ad on TV somewhere than they otherwise could have. Maybe that pushes it over the edge for them. So that is absolutely something I wanted to mention because it's important and it's a big piece of election politics and how it all goes. So let's get into the prediction. In this video, because it's 1 week, I'm going to go pretty fast through the safe states, okay? We're going to go through that pretty quickly, and the ones that are really swingy, we're going to focus on. So Hawaii, we're not really going to mention it, and then honestly, Alaska, again, competitive Senate race, we've mentioned it, fairly competitive House race. The presidential race, this is a likelihood characterization at this point because we just haven't seen the polling. The only way that, I know I've mentioned many times that the Democrats can be very competitive here on the presidential level, but the only way that we have any reason to believe they can win it is if there's actually some polling to show that, and there just isn't. Washington is very safe, as is Oregon and California. We know this. Now, in Nevada, I think the Democrats have been able to stave off some of those concerns I have outlined for you about turnout and the possibility that their turnout could be suppressed by the pandemic. Why is that? Well, as we know, polling in this state is usually pretty wrong and it's usually pretty slanted to the Republicans. But what we've seen is Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have a very big polling edge here. And that's, I don't think that the methodologies have been totally different. I mean, we know that they've changed a little bit given what happened in 16 and 18, but they haven't changed that much. And so when you're ahead in the polling by the extents in which Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are, in a state like Nevada, you're probably going to be fine. I'd be very surprised, especially in a Democratic wave here, if this didn't go their way. I'm still not going to label it safe because it's just not a safe state by and large, so I'm going to label it that way. Idaho, will remain safe. And while we're at it, Montana, interestingly enough, some of the margins here have been kind of close in our most recent polling, and so that actually worked out when I inadvertently hit it there because I was going to label it likely anyway. And just today, we're going to touch on this in our Senate prediction tonight, we saw a poll that had Governor Steve Bullock leading Steve Daines by 1% in a public policy polling poll, which is a big result for the Democrats because that's a crucial Senate seat in these elections. So keep an eye on that. Wyoming will be safe. Now, I want to mention Utah again because we touched on it yesterday. But what's interesting to me about this state is, again, the final margins here are going to be so fascinating to watch. And I think this is a state that is in part going to help decide some of these really bizarre popular vote totals that we expect to see in this election. We know Joe Biden's going to win the popular vote. At this point, most Democrats are going to win the popular vote. We know that. The question is, by how much? Is it going to be just an absolute, shelling of a landslide in the popular vote? Well, Utah could be a reason why. Why? Because Mitt Romney has said he did not vote for Donald Trump. Voters in Utah love him and respect him. Voters also really like Evan McMullin, who got 21% of the vote in 2016 in this state, and he has endorsed Joe Biden. We've also seen polling that has this within about 10%. Excuse me. And we also have seen Ben McAdams, the lone Democratic House member from the Salt Lake City area, also be hanging on to his seat to this point in the polling. So that's why I'm going to label it likely as a margin. If Donald Trump ultimately wins this by 20%, who cares? Because he's going to win these 6 votes anyway, but definitely an interesting state to watch. Now, Arizona, I touched on it yesterday, but I want to mention it again. I received a comment, or a question, I guess, in the comments section a couple days ago asking, what is a realignment state? What does that mean? So let's get into it again. What a realignment state is you take, let's start with the Democratic Party because it's a little more straightforward for them in this instance. What are their base states? Where do they get their votes? How do they, like, we talk about these swing states, states that could potentially flip, but ultimately you still need to reach 270. So where are those base states? California, New York, Washington, Illinois, another big one for them, Vermont, Maryland, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, all these in this column right here. And then there's some that are a little less like that. You have states like traditionally Michigan, New Hampshire, Maine, like 3/4 of Maine, of course. And then there are some that are a little bit beyond that, like Colorado and New Mexico, which are still officially swing states according to 538. For the Republicans, it's Texas. It's, Missouri, another Big Ten votes there, 11 in Indiana. They usually can get 15 in North Carolina, 16 in Georgia. So that is what the state of Arizona, that's why it's so crucial. Because what we know is that this state could flip. And if those 11 votes do, Donald Trump's path to 270 narrows. And the reason I'm saying it's a realignment state, though, is because this state is showing signs of permanently switching over to the Democrats. This is not a state like Texas that has kind of become a swing state potentially for this election. We don't really know what's going to happen beyond that. Whereas in Arizona, this started happening 4 years ago, where Hillary Clinton came close in 2016. Donald Trump only won it with a plurality. And Mark Kelly is challenging well Martha McSally, who of course is not a very popular incumbent GOP senator. So that is what I mean when I say it's a realignment state. Polling has been consistent in this state. I still think it's going to be closer than people expect. I think both Donald Trump and Martha McSally will get around 47% of the vote here, but Mark Kelly and Joe Biden prevail. To me, these two states, I kind of like to lump these in together. In this election, the Republicans just don't have a chance here. Okay, Cory Gardner, the Republican senator from the state of Colorado, is, as me and the Jewish faith and some of my Jewish friends out there would say, he is kaput, as we would say. He is kind of looking for other work, I would imagine, at this point. The RNSC has even stopped spending in this race altogether. John Hickenlooper is a shoo-in. They might as well already swear him in at this point. But on the presidential level, it's even more like that, as is New Mexico. Hasn't gone to a Republican in the presidential race since 2004. No reason to believe it will happen this time. North Dakota, it'll also be safe, as will South Dakota. Always watch the final margins, as I've mentioned, in South Dakota, because the state Democratic Party in South Dakota is as well run as any state party in the country. Nebraska, the Democrats have very little presence there. We know that, except for the lone district in the second district, which they have an outside shot in. By the way, I have managed to finally get this fixed down here on the district bar, but it's still conveniently, it's not really the time to change it. Now, in Kansas, we know what happened in the gubernatorial race there 2 years ago. And the Senate race here between Roger Marshall and Barbara Bollier is very compelling as well. And I also think this is a state that we can point to after the election and say, well, maybe this is also why some of the popular vote margins were as big as they were, because I think Barbara Bollier is boosting some Democratic turnout in the state. She might help wrangle in a few thousand more voters for Joe Biden. So that is why it's a safe state, but it's definitely a state to watch and, again, analyze on the popular vote margins. Oklahoma, nothing to talk about. Now, in the state of Texas, over the last 2 days, we've had a change in characterization here twice. The first time, I switched it all the way to tilt Democrat for the first time on this channel. And then the very next day, I had to change it back because we saw one poll that had Donald Trump up by 5 points, a highly ranked pollster. And the Republicans have just kind of earned the right in this state to where if they get 1 or 2 polls that go their way, it'll switch back, whereas the Democrats need like 5 or 6, consecutively. Let's look at the most recent polling here. What we've seen is, this is starting yesterday because we haven't gotten anything here today. Biden +1, -4, -2. This is for Biden because he's the one on offense here. So +1, -4, -2, +1, -5. and then +3, +2. So you get the idea. That gives you a sense of where this stands. It's still, I think, in the Donald Trump column, but not by much. Okay, and if Joe Biden wins the state, I would not be surprised. Another popular vote state to watch, and also, I think what we're seeing, Beto O'Rourke, his organization, and obviously the turnout for Joe Biden, the turnout in this state to this point has been absolutely ridiculous. The numbers that we're seeing, so you can imagine some congressional candidates for the Democrats are going to have a lot of success. And mark my words, it is not. Well, I can't say mark my words when I'm not really making a prediction, but do not be surprised at all if the Democratic Party flips the state house here. That would be that'd be unbelievable for them if they could do that. Can you imagine the Democratic Party having the majority in one of the houses of Texas Congress? I mean, that is unheard of in this state. I'm from this state. I was born and raised in Dallas. By the way, if any of you are from Texas, please shout out in the channel. I will give you a shout out in the YouTube video. By the way, I did get some clarification. I am officially now. There has been some vagueness in some laws that are currently in litigation right now, but I have been told that I am allowed to mention you by name. So if you are from the Lone Star State, shout out, and I will give you some points, if you will, on my channel. But anyway, Texas still remains tilt for the Republicans. Now in Minnesota, it's gotten away from the GOP. They blew this. They completely, Donald Trump had a chance here to really make this a tougher lift for the Democrats, and would be able to kind of offset a potential flip in Arizona or Wisconsin and begin to expand his paths to 270. He only lost it by 1.5% 4 years ago. He's going to lose it by a hell of a lot more this time. I would expect him to lose it by 8 to 9 points, maybe more. There is a Senate race here, but Tina Smith is firmly on track to win. She's up by about 11 points, I believe, in a poll released just today. Also, I have to mention this again. We still don't know exactly the conditions surrounding Jason Lewis, who is the Republican Senate candidate here. He underwent emergency surgery earlier this week. So we'll have to obviously keep an eye on how that potentially affects turnout. I don't want to politicize his health, but it's definitely worth mentioning. But on the presidential level, I have it safe. Now in Iowa, it's just a matter of I can't really see Joe Biden and the Democratic Party making up this much ground in this state. They were just too far behind. What did Hillary get? 43, like 41%, in this? I mean, that's just too much ground. Now they made it up, to some extent in the midterms when Fred Hubbell, the Democrat, got within like 6 points, give or take a couple tenths of a point against Fred Hubbell, or excuse me, against Kim Reynolds, the incumbent governor. Hubbell got about 47 and change percentage-wise. That's kind of where I expected this to peter out. Now, there was a poll today that had Biden up by 5, and that is at least a little bit congruent with what we're seeing in the Senate race here, which is so competitive between Joni Ernst and Teresa Greenfield. That is boosting turnout. I believe per capita, and it's a little hard to understand exactly what this stat means because I don't understand what per capita means in a voter's sense, because not every single person in the state of Iowa is voting, so I'm not sure why they use this stat. But what they say is per capita, this is the most expensive Senate race in history. Again, not sure why they use it, why they use the term per capita, because it doesn't affect every voter, but whatever. We'll take them at their word for it. Salt and Politico for what it's worth. But again, on the presidential level, I still don't think the Democrats have enough ground. It's too big. It's too big a margin to make up. Missouri, we're going to label it safe. I mean, I don't know that, Joe Biden really should be spending any time here. They are actually airing ads here, which I'm very surprised by. To me, that's kind of like just trying to run up the score at this point. I mean, I don't know about you. You should focus on getting your butt in the White House before especially, I mean, even if you're an incumbent, I don't think you should be doing anything like that. Kind of like Donald Trump is still airing ads in New Mexico. I don't see the point there. Arkansas is safe. Louisiana is safe. Now, I've mentioned Mississippi a lot on this channel because of the turnout possibilities that we'll see here. Mike Espy's down 8 points in a poll against Cindy Hyde-Smith. That's exactly what he lost by in that special election against her. Kudos to him for trying again, but I honestly don't really think that is going to move the needle for Joe Biden. Even now, I was a little surprised to see that the Lincoln Project actually took out some ads in this state, which was a little surprising to me. I didn't expect that. I thought that they were going to be more focused on the actual states that could flip in the Senate. They've also taken out ads here on the presidential level, but to me, that's a little different because at least it's a national election there, and who knows. So again, I think this will ultimately be a likely margin because the minority turnout in the state will be very high. In Alabama, I'm actually going to label it safe because I think turnout for the Republicans is going to be pretty high here. I don't think they're very happy that one of their senators is a Democrat. I don't think they're particularly happy that Tommy Tuberville happens to not be yet one of the two senators from this state, and that Doug Jones is. I think that's a little disappointing for them. So you get the idea there. All right, now in Florida, always a hard state to gather. It really is. I've changed the characterization on here several times. It's just tough because this is a state where polling is often a little bit wrong. Sometimes we fail to accommodate some of the voters up in the Panhandle area. Now, we know for a fact that that is where Joe Biden has been concentrating some of his ads. So let's go through some of the more recent polls. There were two released today. One from Florida Atlantic University, very high-ranked pollster, had Biden ahead, but only by 2%. Another one from a group I've never heard of called Susquehanna Polling and Research has Trump actually up by 5%. Now, it's only a sample size of 400 voters. Okay, so let's go through the rest of them. Trump +1, Biden +2, Biden +2, Biden again +2, +2, -4, but that's Rasmussen. We don't take them seriously. Morning Consult, Biden +7, and then +4. A CNN poll had him up by 2, Biden that is, then +4, +5, +4. So there's a little bit of a lean for Joe Biden. It's very small, but it's a lean. Now, we've mentioned before how the polls were actually kind of wrong in 2018. They were far more wrong in this state than they were in 16, because Andrew Gillum and Andrew Gillum and Bill Nelson, both Democrats running for the Senate and governor, were ahead heading into election night. Both of them lost by very, very narrow margins. It was a combined loss of less than 50,000 votes. Since then, though, on that same night, the Democrats passed Amendment 4. Okay? So with the passage of Amendment 4 comes, obviously, a big surge, I would imagine, in, new voters. Now, we saw that 1.4 million new voters were given the right to vote. It is estimated that only 8% of them actually will. 8%, okay? And not all 8% of them are going to vote. So let's say 6% of them vote. Not all 6% are going to vote for Biden. Okay, we expect most of them will, but not all 6 of them will. So if 4% of those do, I mean, the reality of the situation is, if you're the Biden campaign and you saw that passage of Amendment 4, even though, let's say conservatively, it's, let's even say 3%, okay? So by and large, I mean, what evidence, do we have to suggest that Joe Biden is going to be able to push that number up from like 49.5% where the Democrats get? Well, again, with 3% of those voting, that's another 42,000 votes out of 1.4 million. 42,000. And that's a pretty conservative estimate. Okay, that's 8% that are estimated are going to be actually able to vote after the GOP managed to, through a lot of court challenges, limit the amount of people who can actually vote. And we're only saying 3% of them are going to vote for Biden. Okay? Not all of them are going to vote for Biden, as we know, and, many just won't vote. So let's say, again, only 3%. That's over 40,000 new votes for the Biden ticket. That, to me, is a huge piece of this equation. And I think in a big Democratic wave here, in a state that elected Biden and Obama two different times, I think that goes Biden's way. Georgia is as close as it can get right now, but it's similar to Texas in that it just has an identity. It just has an identity. And this is a state that it just takes forever to shift from red to blue. Now, there are 2 Senate races here that are uber competitive. We saw some Civics polls today. Civics is not a very reliable pollster. It's interesting, though, because over time, Civics has not particularly been favorable to the Democrats. So let me just take you through these recent polls in this state. These are all Civics polls. Biden +5, and then we saw a bunch of Senate polls that had Raphael Warnock leading both Doug Collins and Kelly Loeffler by double digits, and Jon Ossoff ahead of David Perdue. Then in other polls, we saw Biden +1, +6, +1, and then a tie. And then -4, +4, tie. So this is literally a coin flip at this point. We know that turnout in this state is about as high as any state in the country. It's as high percentage-wise as it is in Texas, obviously not in raw numbers. It's really, really energizing for the Democrats to see those numbers, and they may just pull this out. Now, let me put it this way. If this was a state that had a better history of electing Democrats, I would definitely be labeling this tilt Democrat. But again, it just doesn't. And, 2 years ago was a Democratic waiver. Stacey Abrams came up short. She did. Let me say this, between the presidential race and both Senate races, I would expect the Democrats to take one of those three. Now, in South Carolina, obviously the presidential races or the Senate race is competitive here. But on the presidential level, I'm going to label it likely. I do expect Biden, because of his popularity in the South and amongst the African American community, to get around 45, 46%, kind of similar to the James Smith Henry McMaster race from a couple years back. Tennessee will be safe. Now, North Carolina, polling has been very friendly to Joe Biden recently in this state, and that's a big sign for him. That's a big result, because if he wins this state, it is tough for Donald Trump to, even if he wins Florida, it is tough for him to win without North Carolina. Just today, a public policy polling poll, Biden +4, Biden +1, Biden +1, +1, tie. Then some Senate polls and +6, +8, +4, -3, but that's a Trafalgar Group poll. Okay, that's a good sense of where this lies right now. Okay, is the only poll in recent memory that has Donald Trump leading Joe Biden in North Carolina is a Trafalgar Group poll, which is very, very, very favorable to conservatives. And even then, it's only by 3%. Okay, there's a big Senate race here that is boosting Biden, I think. I also think Roy Cooper being on the ballot is boosting him. So to me, this is tilt Democrat. All right, Illinois, that's a big liberal bastion. We know that. Kentucky will remain with the Republicans, as will West Virginia. Virginia will go blue. Indiana is always kind of an interesting state to watch, just because it does have a history of electing some Democrats, but obviously not this time. Now, to me, Ohio is basically a clone of Iowa. The Democrats it's just too much ground to make up. They fell too far behind in 2016. I think they've kind of lost Ohio. It's sort of a state now to me where they can be competitive and can get some people elected to statewide office, but they can't really win it on the presidential level, to me, at this point. We saw what happened in the midterms. Mike DeWine, that was a narrowing again of the presidential race, and Sherrod Brown did win re-election. We get that. They had some success in the House here as well in Ohio. But again, Hillary Clinton only got 43% of the vote here. And this is an area of the country that, even though we might see some of them go blue, this part of the country is trending away from the Democrats. And Ohio's always been a tough state for a Democrat to win. It's largely pro-life. It's quite Catholic. The story here. So Ohio is another state that I'm only going to be able to label, tilt, but I don't expect it to go Biden's way. Now, Maryland, we know what's going to happen there, as we also know what will happen in D.C. Now, in Wisconsin. Again, I'm going to go through all four races that have been very friendly to the Democrats since 2016. Hillary Clinton lost this by less than 1%, so there's not that much ground to make up. Early on in Trump's term, and I believe the first year, there was a state Senate special election down here in the southern portion of the state in which a Democrat was able to win and give the Democrats a seat at that district for the first time in decades. Then in the midterms, we saw Tammy Baldwin, a pretty progressive senator, by the way. She won by 11%, easily won re-election, and Tony Evers unseated Scott Walker. That was one of the biggest high-profile flips in the entire country on any level. Then, also earlier this year, in the middle of the pandemic, a Democrat won a Supreme Court race. Turnout was very high, despite the fact that 180 polling sites in Wisconsin were reduced all the way to 5. That is incredible. So that combined with steady polling, I'm going to label it lean. That's a downgrade from likely. The only reason is I don't think I was properly taking into account just how overstated Democrats can be in polling in this state, because oftentimes the white rural voters are always forgotten about. So I'm only going to label it lean, but it's still in Biden's column. We've talked about it before. The Republicans have waved the white flag here. And I'm a little surprised that they have, because not only is it 16 electoral votes, for goodness sake, but it was crucial to Donald Trump's victory 4 years ago. And there's a competitive Senate race in which they're kind of leaving their own candidate out to dry. John James is not going to beat Gary Peters. And so I expect this state to go the Democratic Party's way. Polling has been very kind to them throughout. This was the closest of these three states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, in which Donald Trump only won it by 0.27% 4 years ago. That's easily made up for Joe Biden in this election. Lastly, Pennsylvania, in this Rust Belt area, is another state in which, it's scrappy Scranton Joe. This is where he's from. Now, I know Trump today tweeted, up 3% in Pennsylvania, but he's not. Okay, he's just not. That's not a preferential statement. He's just not. I mean, I don't know where that information exists. I mean, let's look through it here. Biden +7, then +7 again, +5. There's one that has a -2, or Trump +2, an insider advantage poll, not a high-ranked pollster, and again, only 400 voters. Here's one, a big sample size, almost 10,000 voters from SurveyMonkey, only a D-, but a huge size. 10,000 voters has Biden up by 7%. And it was conducted over a month. Then YouGov polls, +7, +8, +7, +7. These are big leads for Joe Biden. Again, this is a state that that he's originally from. There were 2 statewide races here in the 2018 midterms. Bob Casey Jr., the incumbent senator, easily won re-election, and Tom Wolf easily won re-election. So all that is to say, I have this as lean. Both candidates are fighting like hell for these 20 electoral votes in these closing days. And by the way, I want to mention one other thing here too. I'm going to lump Delaware into this too, is that we've seen a lot of things where Biden is just kind of hanging out in his home state of Delaware doing events. Doing an event in Delaware is kind of the same as doing an event in Pennsylvania. Okay, so obviously, it may not be as optimal as just doing it in Philadelphia, but it's such a close proximity that you have people who live in those suburbs who may have come to those rallies and actually still live in Pennsylvania and will pull the lever for Biden there. 14 votes in New Jersey will go Biden's way, as will 7 in Connecticut, 4 in Rhode Island, and 11 in Massachusetts, and 29, of course, in New York, and another 3 in Vermont. Now, in New Hampshire, look, this is another state, kind of like Minnesota, where I think the Republicans blew it. They had an opportunity here. This is a state they can win in. They can, but they just have to be smart, and they just haven't done that. I mean, they have Donald Trump's campaign. It's not partisan, guys. I mean, it's just the truth. It has not been very well run. Okay, they've had multiple campaign managers. They've been outraised. They've had a number of issues where Trump has said these bizarre things where he's like, I wasn't actually planning to come to Erie, Pennsylvania. All that is to say, for a state like New Hampshire, you have to run a really good campaign, because if you do and you're a Republican, you can win here. Okay, as evidenced by Kelly Ayotte and Chris Sununu, the current governor, who's going to win re-election by damn near 30 points. So they kind of blew it here. That's 4 votes for Joe Biden. In Maine, it's the same old story. It's kind of a blue state in most respects, except for that one rural district up in the northern portion of the state, and even that is not out of the possibilities for Joe Biden, because Jared Golden, who's a Democratic congressman from that district, he is easily cruising on route to another re-election from that part of the state. So there's your map. 333 to 205. There's only 1 week left. Okay, at this point, with 7 days remaining, if Donald Trump wins this election, it will be because the polling is very, very wrong. Okay? If the polling is even pretty accurate, not 100% accurate, if it's even just pretty accurate, which again, it was in 2016. He led, Donald Trump did, in Florida on Election Day, and Iowa, and Ohio, and Georgia, and Texas, and Arizona. Okay, he even led in Nevada, but we've talked about that whole thing. The only state that was just completely wrong and was out of the margin for error and was a total surprise was Wisconsin. That's it. Led in North Carolina, was barely behind in Pennsylvania, barely behind in Michigan. The final RCP prediction had Hillary Clinton winning the election 272 to 266. That's a nail biter. Okay? So if Donald Trump is able to win this election at this point, it'll be because the polling is very, very, very wrong. And I would imagine there would have to be some court challenges in validating thousands and thousands of mail-in ballots. So in this prediction, Joe Biden flips Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Florida, giving him 101 more votes than Hillary Clinton received 4 years ago. So thank you guys so much again for watching. Please stay tuned for our 1 week Senate election prediction video. Subscribe down on the subscribe button, of course, if you have not already. Hit down in the comment section below any questions, comments, concerns, corrections, anything you may have for me, and hit that like button as well. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in November.